Hi everyone. So we are now reaching a point where we have marked a distinction. We've covered two of the main areas that are significant to gerontology. The first one, of course, is biology, and that makes perfect sense if we're talking about the health of a person, what makes a person get older. All those things are important to kind of understand, and so that is one significant area in gerontology. The second one, of course, is psychology, understanding the dynamics of how a person ages and its effect on the mind or the personality or, the internal thoughts, right? It does take a lot. You don't notice it, but for someone who's getting older, when they look at pictures when they're younger, think about most of you and looking back at your old pictures, thinking about how you were back then versus how you are now, right? And those changes that have taken place, a lot of that are changes that are taking place at the mind level, not just the physical level, but the mind level, right? There's a lot of, you're basically looking at two different persons, right? If you're young and you're looking at a much younger version of yourself, let's say a child, you definitely know you're looking at a very different person. If you are looking at yourself today and comparing yourself to, let's say, your 15-year-old version, you understand that you are thinking very differently than that person. You are processing very differently than that person. And as you age, that is something that continues to happen. Your mind continues to develop and change and function, and we all know about the neuroplasticity of the mind and how it, continues to grow and reshape how people think. And this is important because it shows us that even though we technically stop physically developing, it doesn't stop us from developing as human beings, right? Because we're more than just the biology of ourselves. So that's key, right? Now the next most important part of gerontology is the socialization or the sociology of things. And so gerontology has biology, psychology, and the sociology. And these three things are, if you think about it right, come together to make up what gerontology is. Within these things, we have other aspects that we think about, right? Relationship and intimacy and caregiving, and there's a lot of issues of gender that we need to think about, issues of race. All of these are dealing with loss. All of these are things that we are part of the biological, psychological, and sociological aspects of aging. So now we're moving into that area. This is now the kind of sociology leg of aging. And so I'll speak to it as a separate item, but understand, and I think that your book does this at the end, at least makes a comment about the interdisciplinary nature of the biology and the psychology. Because truly, if you are looking at the world using a gerontological lens, you must be incorporating these three facets. This is what makes us gerontologists, that we are able to see aging as a process that exists from different perspectives, right? If different influences are coming into it. This chapter, chapter 8, focuses on the social theories of aging. And boy, there are a lot of them. So you have to keep in mind, right, that this is, if you're taking a sociology class, it won't be too difficult to kind of put these parts together, but it's you might be familiar with some of this stuff. So the readings, pay attention to the readings, pay attention to the theories. Don't get overwhelmed with the theories. I think the book does a good job of breaking them down for you. I'll talk a little bit about that right now, just kind of in passing, but I want you to keep these concepts in mind as we're moving forward. Most important, I think, is for us is thinking about the life course. I think that is a particularly important way of looking at aging, is to understand those different stages that people go through throughout their life course. I think that's an important perspective. So here's a quick look at those ideas, but here is, if you want to think about it, this is kind of a breakdown of the chapter as best as I possibly could. And remember, these discussions are meant to be short, so I'm going to try to sum this up really quickly as best I can, go into the ninth, and try to keep this somewhat short. But do the readings, obviously, and the discussion questions. So it explores primarily the ways scholars explain aging from a social and behavioral viewpoints, right? Different from biology and different from psychology. We're now talking about actual behaviors, and looks at things as he integrates through the life course, through intersectionality and a person's environmental perspective, and understanding how lives are transformed, throughout their life course process, and of course later on in life. These are the kinds of things you need to think about. It's role theory, right? People changes their roles as they get older, and that is something that you need to take into account. Now, for a long time, people will be between the ages usually of, we could say 24, which is the age that we normally think about someone entering a career, although obviously someone who might be entering at 21, but or at 18, but someone enters the labor market fully around the age of 24, and between the age of 24 to about the age of 65, they're actively engaged and they are a worker within the, when you get to a certain point past the age of 65, you're most likely going to retire, or your status in the workplace might change. And so this is what we're talking about, role changes, right? You go from being a single person to maybe being a married person to maybe becoming a parent, maybe then becoming a grandparent. These are role changes that occur all the time, right? So it's one of those things to keep in mind when we think about the roles that people have and how they shift and how they change the way in which we engage with each other, right? Activity theory is about the satisfaction in old age that comes from maintaining social activities and roles. This is the thing where people become very active. Is the distinction is with disengagement theory, which was very, very popular. No one follows disengagement theory anymore, but it's still influential. This is the thing that you need to, no scholar sits there and goes that an old person kind of disengages from society and eventually just dies. That's not how we view aging. However, it plays a significant role in the way we think about what happens to us as we age. It is not too hard to imagine that being old means that you are no longer involved in doing things. And that's how it continues to have an impact on us, right? Continuity theory, right, involves how people maintain consistent behaviors and personality and values as they age. That's just means that a person is able to think about, who they are, what they're doing, and thinking about what their values are moving forward. The life course perspective is how age changes based on a person's perspective and opportunities that they have. It's kind of looking at generally how the things that they are doing will affect how their lives will be, and vice versa. Where they are is based on how their lives was shaped before, right? It is a life course perspective. It's the entirety of a life that you're measuring in a person. Political economy of aging is brought about a lot of the disengagement in aging, because it kind of tied into this notion of how people engage with the economy, and there seems to be this kind of like structure of how as you age, power shifts. Now the question is, of course, how does that power shift? At one level, if you think about people who are 55 and older in our society, there's a lot of economic power in that group as a group, but then when you think about it individually, that power at the individual level might be less so. So this is how you have to think about these things, and it comes down to the micro-macro perspective, right? The micro perspective is the individual. You have to think about how these theories might be guiding individual actions, but macro is the greater, structural parts. Some of these theories are solely structural. They only talk about the structure and look at the world from a very structural perspective, right? Others are about the individuals, and so you have to think about, like, how does this impact the individual? And it's this balance of the micro and the macro in these theories that you have to really get a grasp on, right? Social construction, right, is the notion of what does it mean to be old, right? I keep doing air quotes, I'm sorry. I know you don't see it. I keep doing air quotes whenever I use the term old. because it's intended to be this kind of, so bear with me. So old age, right? What does it mean to be old? You know, do you sit back? Do you not do anything? Do you date? Do you not date? Do you get involved with other people? This is all coming into the next chapter, right? The next chapter has to deal with the you know, social supports, whether or not you're connecting. These are social networks, right? The connections that you build over time. There's always this kind of idea that as you age, you begin to lose a lot of these connections, but it's important to kind of keep this in mind. Here also, roles become very important, right? The person's role changes, whether they're a grandparent. You know, what does it mean to be a grandparent? What does it mean to be a great grandparent? What does it mean? You know, does it mean that? What does it mean to come out later in life, right? If your sexual identity, you know, has finally you get the opportunity to explore and understand yourself a little bit further, which could happen much later in life, right? This is not something that occurs just among young people. Older people also will have experiences where they're coming out and identifying a part of their lives that they might have been suppressing or just not in tune with, and so now a lot of that happens, and so it's an extremely important time period for a lot of these things to be taken into account, right? Because that could break a lot of relationships that people have in place, right? The how people are taken care of are very important when it comes to networks. You need to keep in mind that the economic burden that is placed on the family, where both family members, and actually sometimes multiple family members, have to be in the labor force in order to financially sustain the family, means that caring for, obviously you can look at it as caring for the young, but also caring for people who are older and in need of care, creates a huge burden on that population, on that family. And so there are questions revolving around who cares and what kind of services are provided and what kind of choices. Many people today are opting to aging in place. Aging in place meaning that many of them want to stay in the homes that they're in. As you can imagine, this could be problematic at so many different levels, right? You're talking about issues where you can find people completely isolated because they are refusing to live outside of where their home is, and so they're just staying at home and have nobody to help support them. But also, if you look at it from a larger scale, the question becomes, right, some people have these homes that are, you know, usually multi-purpose homes where they are either living by themselves or maybe just living with one other person, and they're insisting on being in these places. And it's okay to do that, and we want to support, right, agency. We want to support the person's right to self-determination. There's no question about that. The question is how, as we are aging, this is for me to kind of express to you, right, so an idea to consider, right, as we are aging, what does it mean for us to age in place, right? Are we tied to the homes that we're in, or does it mean that, you know, we want to be with family, or that we want to make other types of arrangements that we would be able to view as our home, right? It's an interesting, fascinating idea, because if you think about it, many people have worked extremely hard for their homes. It takes, you know, a mortgage could be 30 years, and so that is your entire labor force participation could be involved in you working towards buying your home. Yes, I understand the home crisis for millennials and all this other stuff. That's not the point I'm making. I'm talking about those people who are right now at the point where they might find themselves retired and, you know, at a point in their lives where they're older, and so maybe they have more care needs, but they're insisting on staying in their homes, right? And they want to because this is what they build everything towards. It's towards eventually purchasing and owning their homes. and to be at that point later in life where your ability to be able to stay at the home can be detrimental to you is something that needs to be measured out. And so this is the debate, this is the fight that goes on, right? And this is how this sociological aspect of things is how it plays into understanding gerontology, right? So if again, going back to the original part where I talked about the biology and the psychology, and if you start thinking about the sociology, now you can see the three factors almost folding in on themselves and giving you that much more concrete picture of aging and what aging is, right? You're looking at a person who has reached a point where they might need additional care, right? The biology part. You're looking at a person who is experiencing stress and anxiety because they need additional care, and they've but they want to stay in their homes, and so there's stress that's built off of this idea that I worked all this time in order to be in my home, and now I'm being told or have a hard time with the idea of staying in this home. And of course, it's the social aspects of things where society is expecting certain things from these individuals to be moving towards other care services. And if you think about the housing crisis, it's not too hard to imagine people saying, "Oh, maybe you should be moving out of these housing crises." By the way, that I haven't even brought up reverse mortgages as an issue when it comes to housing, but that's for a later discussion. Thank you so much, and I apologize that this one took so long, but again, it is the third most significant part of gerontology as a field, right? Biology, psychology, sociology. These three things come together and they give us our gerontological lens.